handle time. I can't wait. These are so fantastic. I've left my tails to sew them on, but I'll show you how to do all of that. So this is basically how they'll look. They have little spots, little circles to sew on, and then the fat rope handle at the top. So let's get started. I'm using leftovers. I might run out of this one, but crossing my fingers. I'm going to leave a longer tail of this blue because I'm going to sew it on with the blue. So I'm going to leave a longer tail, I don't know, 18 inches or so. Yeah. And the rest are nice and short up here. So we're going to start by making our chain. So I'm going to do my slip knot. And I'm using the same hook as the bag. So I'm using a 6mm. And like that. So you're going to make your chain as long as you want your handles to be. I did 55 stitches, chain stitches for this one, and plus 1, so I did 56. So I will be doing the same for this one. So for however many chains you're doing, just write it down so you don't forget for your second handle, because they have to be the same. So just make your chain 1, 2, and you don't have to worry about doing it loose, like a loose foundation chain. Just do it regular. This chain is going to prevent your handles from stretching too much. So you don't have to do it too tight, but you don't have to do it loose either. So do the same number. I'm doing 56. I'll see you when you're done your foundation. Another thing you can do is just put a stitch marker in every 20 stitches or 10 stitches or however many you want. So when you're counting at the end, you don't have to count that chunk. You'll know that every stitch marker is whatever denomination you assign to it. And 56. So there is my chain, and you can kind of get an idea of how big your handle will be. Just lay it out like that. So there's my chain of 56, and here is my handle of 56. So it's pretty accurate to how it's going to end up. Now take your chain and just turn it so you're looking at the V's on that side. Looking at your V's. Now into the second stitch from the hook, so the second V down, just push your hook in. It doesn't matter if you go over 2 strands or anything like that. I'm just going to go through 1 and make a single crochet. So 1 single crochet. Keep going all the way down, making 1 single crochet into each stitch, and I'll meet you when you get to the end. I've got my little curly Q here. Single crochet always does that anyway, but if yours looks like one of those twisty hair thingies, it's normal. However, into this last stitch, so I did a single crochet into the second to last. Now here is my last V in there. So into that space, you're going to make 6 double crochets. So wrap your yarn and go into that last V, grab your yarn and bring it back. Wrap your yarn, take off 2, wrap your yarn and take off 2. Now into that stitch you just made, into the first double crochet, put a stitch marker right now straight away. Okay, so there's our stitch marker. Now that's our first one, so we need to do 5 more. Oh, Jiminy crickets. A lot of yarn here, it's very bulky. So this is 3. This is 4. Now you can go over your little tails. I'm going to drop, remember that long one we had? I made a long blue one. So the long blue one I'm going to drop, and these short guys I'm going to go over. We don't need the short guys, but we do need the long one. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, so 2 more double crochets into the same stitch, dropping our long tail. We can use it later for sewing. Last one. This is number 6. Okay, and into that number 6, the last stitch we just made, stitch marker. Because for me, it's hard to see what's a single crochet and a double crochet, especially with all this yarn, but all that looks pretty much the same to me. So I put a stitch marker right after I do the stitch. Don't have to think about it anymore. So now we're going to be going into the next stitch. So we worked into this one here. The next one is just there. So now we're doing single crochets all along the back side, or the other side of our foundation chain. So single crochet, and we're going over those short tails. They can disappear now. And you can see where your stitches are by where these V's come in. You just push in your hook and make a single crochet. So every single crochet on this side gets a single crochet on that side. And there's a spot where you can see, I know this yarn is terrible for tutorials, but you can see these stitches. So all those spots are getting a single crochet going back along this side. So keep going back along your work, and I'll see you when we get to the end of this row. When you reach the end, just lay out your handle and you'll be able to see if your stitches, if you put any extra stitches in. If you did, you'll have like a glump like that on one side, and then go and check why it's glumpy. So this stitch is glumpy just because it's This stitch is glumpy because of how thick that chunk of yarn is. But the stitches are right. You can line them up with your finger or your crochet hook. But on my first handle, I had to go back and undo a chunk way at the beginning where I put in an extra stitch. So just take a look for it now, because you don't want your handle being weird. It's a gorgeous handle. We want to do it really well. Now, at the end of our the end of our first round, going around, making an oval shape, we are going to do our 6 double crochets into the end down here. So it's really hard to see with my yarn, and I do apologize for that, but I'm just going to make a spot where I'm going to say that's the end. So I'm going into there and doing my first double crochet quite tightly. I don't want loose stitches for my handle. So there's my first double crochet. So grab a stitch marker and put it in that stitch right away. Okay, there's our first double crochet. Now we need to do 5 more into that same spot. So this is number 2. Three. One of my yarns is running out soon. I'm just keeping an eye on it. 4. Ooh, that's a shorty. I think I had to change it for this one here. Yeah, let me change that now. Oh, right here, lucky. That's one good thing about having a mess all around you. Eventually you'll have the right yarn. Okay. So to join my new yarn of that one strand, I am going to finish my stitch in the usual way, but also putting a loop of new yarn on my hook and holding it awkwardly all together and pulling it through that stitch if I can. Oh, did I get it all? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll do 6. I think this is 6. I'll count again. It's tight in there. There we go. Now I'll drop that little tail. It'll hide somewhere politely for me, I'm sure. Make sure I have all my yarns on my hook. Good. Okay, let me count my 6. So then my first, second, third, 4, 5. Okay, so one more. Into the same spot, which is now full. Look how much yarn is in there. Crazy. But there is room for one more. Okay. Okay. Now I think that's 6. Let's count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Yes. So stitch marker into that number 6. The last stitch we did, stitch marker. So now going all the way along, let me throw that down so it stops. There we go. Now all the way along this side, going into the next stitch. So here is a bit tricky also. We have to go into that stitch right there because that is our first single crochet. You can see we put a stitch marker on our first double on this side. So this stitch here is our first single, and then straight across is our first single on this side. So get your stitches back enough where you can get into that first stitch, because you really need your count to be the same. So single crochet into that one. A bit tight because you want to really cinch that one down. And now single crochet all the way back down, 1, 1, 1, until we reach our stitch marker. So one last single crochet to that first, well, into the last single crochet. Now where our stitch marker is, that's our first double. So isn't it great we have a stitch marker? Love stitch markers. So now into each stitch we're making 2 double crochets. So 1, and into the same stitch our second one, 2. So you're doing this all the way around this circle part. 2 double crochets into each stitch. So that is our increase. That gives us a nice circle shape to sew onto our bag. So that's really pretty. So we've done 4. We have a total of 12 to do. So 2 into this stitch. For this round I don't really count like, you know, all my stitches. I just make sure I'm putting 2 in each because we used our stitch markers. So that's helpful. One, 2 into that one, 2 into the 5th one, and then this is our last one. Love stitch markers. I think this is one of the best uses of stitch markers in any project I've done. So helpful. If you don't have stitch markers, use a piece of yarn. Just loop a piece of yarn in the first instead of using a stitch marker, or a bobby pin. You don't need actual stitch markers, but they're cuter. So that is my last double crochet, and if you wanted to count, you could see where we started. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So this next stitch here is a single crochet. Not that you can tell, but it is. So into that one, make a tight single crochet. You want to pin those doubles down. There we go. Now back to doing 1 single crochet all the way along this side. 1 into each stitch, single crochets. And I'll meet you at the end before we start our, well, I'll meet you at the stitch marker. So we have one more stitch before our stitch marker, so single crochet into that one. And now same thing, 2 double crochets into the next 6 double wrap your yarn. So 2 into each stitch, 2 double crochets into each stitch going around this end part, this circle. Oh wow, I'm almost out of this blue, but I think I can make it. I'm optimistic. So into this next stitch down here, which is a single crochet, I'm going to make a single crochet. 1 tight single crochet, and into the next stitch I'm going to slip stitch. So just through and through, and chain 1 to make sure that it's a knot, and then I'll just cut my yarn. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and pull that down to secure. Now ideally you would have left the same color you left at the beginning side, so on blue, you would have left a longer strand of blue because you could use that for sewing. But not the end of the world. I ran out. At least I made it, so not complaining. If you have any bits where you joined a new yarn, you can snip them off if you've woven them in as you went. So this is your handle as it is right now. You could use it like that. It's fine, it's cute, it's still great. You might want to slip stitch along the sides here, but what we are going to do is turn this into a cute little tube. But we're doing it backwards. So flip it upside down so it's kind of curved towards your desk. See, that nice curve is like going down. Your back side is facing up, and your pretty side and your V's are facing down. We're going to be stitching this together along this single crochet side or area. So to judge how much yarn you're going to need, if you have to add yarn, you didn't leave a tail, it's 3 times this distance. So 1, 2, 3, approximately. I mean, that's just how I measure. Generally, it's right. So thread your needle. And for this, I'm using a metal needle. I like my plastic ones, but I need the strength of the metal needle. And what we're going to be doing before I zoom in, you take some rope. I'm using this really fancy cording just because I have it, but you would be using something from, like, you could use rope, cotton rope from the grocery store, regular rope, anything that you could technically still stitch through. You want to be able to pin this down on both sides. So we can zoom in now. So I went in with my yarn and just made a knot in the center of that cord so that it is attached to my yarn. Lay it down in the center. You want the end somewhere near the middle of this circle. And if you have ends, hold your ends in the center as well. We can go over them. So now pinch your work together over the cord and any ends that you have. Get them all behaving. There's more. And into this first single crochet, which I guess is actually, well, the first one here. Maybe it's the second single crochet. Pull your yarn through. Make sure your cord stays out of the way. So pull your yarn through there. So that's behaving. Pinch your work together and go through the opposite stitch down, which I think is about there. It's pretty much like the second single crochet that we made. We don't want to totally go into the first because we want this to lay flat against our bag. We don't need it to be too dish-like. I guess you could, but I like it a bit bigger. So pull that and just work your way back and forth in this area about 2 or 3 times, just so we have a good firm squeeze together starting spot, like that. Keeping your ends inside and your cord inside. Now you're just going to go back and forth into each set of single crochets, pulling them tight. You don't want anything loose here, and making sure if you're going over your tails that you're keeping your tails in the middle by your cord. So now go back and forth all along here, at least 1 into each stitch. You can do more than 1 into each stitch. Depends on your yarn. If your yarn is weak or like a wool, you'll want to do more stitching. My yarn is pretty tight, pretty strong, so keep working your way all the way down. That makes a really firm handle. It's not going to go anywhere. So keep working all your way down, and I'll meet you when you get close to this side. Actually, I think a better choice, I wasn't paying attention here, but you want to do the whip stitch. So you want to go in from one side and out the other side, so your yarn wraps around. It kind of pulls your stitches down more into a rope, whereas if you go back and forth, you get a little highway on the top. It doesn't totally matter, it's just how you want the feel to be. And pull each one tight. So how I do it, I go from myself away from myself, and then I just keep doing that. You can also do them closer together that way, because you're not just using your stitches, you're putting them as close together as you feel you need. And then tug each one down and pinch the next area before you go through, so everything is staying snug. And just work your way along this way. So you can see the difference. Here is a more rounded, I suppose, and here has more of a flat highway on top. I'm not undoing it. It's right near the bottom of my bag, but where my hands will be the whip stitch. So hot tip, whip stitch is a good finish for the handle. Keep going, and I'll meet you when we finish this single crochet area. Getting there. I think I have a couple single crochets left to pair up. I'm almost out of my thread or my yarn. So when you get to the end, do a couple whip stitches in the same spot, because that's going to get some stress, get some wear and tear. And now into this cord, it's laying perfectly. I'm just going to give it a bit of a pull, about 1/2 inch or whatever, and then 1/2 inch down, like as much as I pulled. I'm going to go through that cord again and make a little knot like so, and again through it so it gets stuck. I don't want it sliding up into my handle, so I'm just going to knot it onto this yarn as best I can, and then when it stretches back down, that'll go in there in the tube, and then I'm going to stitch that knot up through. But you can see I'm doing this so awkwardly. I'm going to bring it up through that seam so that all that tying onto the cord has somewhere to stick to. And then maybe if I'm lucky, I can feel that cord a little bit on this side and maybe poke through it a couple times, like a pin cushion. Where's my tail? There it is. So that's good. I'm going to come back up, and in here, in my seam, I'm going to knot my yarn just to finish it off. Pull that down. And now I'm going to go back down into the cord for good measure and out the front side. Just pull my yarn through and cut it from the front. So now that tail is going to be stuck in the middle. And we can cut this cord as well. Let me find bigger scissors. So we want this also to be about in the center of our cone or our dish. So I'm gonna still leave an end. I don't want it so short it unravels. I also don't want to burn it with a light or anything, because it'll stop it from fraying, but it'll also make it crunchy. And I don't want crunchy. So I'm just gonna leave about an inch inside there, and our sweet handle is finished. So that is the underside of our handle, and that is the top side, the pretty side. Wish I could fit it in my viewfinder. So now we're going to stitch it onto our bag, and I know you can't feel it, but it is a perfect handle. It doesn't stretch, but it holds its shape, and it is about a 1 inch, 1 and a bit inch diameter, 1 1/4 maybe, but it feels great. It's super strong and it doesn't stretch, so love that. It's fabulous. So let's get her back. So I have sewn on one handle on one side. Fabulous. Waiting for my camera battery to charge. Yeah, as usual. And so we're going to sew this one onto this side. So we'll turn it around. And how I lined it up was with my squares here. So I said not the corner, but these two in the center, but not past the edge. So pretty much right there, and then this one the same, not touching the corner, but these two granny square shells right there, but not going into that edge. So basically there and there is where we're going to be putting our handles. Somewhere like that. I don't want it touching my black either. So between this last row and the end of that, that's where we're putting our handles. So I'll start with the one that has the yarn attached. So thread that onto a metal needle. It's hard to see on mine, but you'll see these V-stitches along the edge. I'm gonna stitch, it's called stitching in the ditch. I'm gonna stitch just along the inside edge of those. So those nice pretty V's stay pretty V's. I'm not messing them up with stitching. So I'm gonna hold it where I want it to be. Well, actually first I'm going to get my yarn and I'm going to start it up here at the top. So it's ready on this one side. And put your handle where you want it to be. And put your needle down into the center of your bag. Like so. And then I like sewing counterclockwise, so I'm just going to work my way over this side. So coming back in from the underside, poke your hook up and grab a stitch. Or go through your handle on the other side. There we go. That's how I'm comfortable stitching. Now, I'm going to go in the ditch. So stitching in the ditch, I'm leaving this V looking pretty, and I'm going in behind it and down into my bag. And then I'm going to come up a little ways up and come up still in behind that V. And then down behind the next V and into the bag. Oops. And up. So you're going to work your way all the way around your handle, leaving those V's looking pretty, and going down into your bag and then back up just on the inside or the ditch going around your pretty V's. Like that. This goes quicker than you think, and it's really secure. Oh, what did I grab on this other side? A tail I should be sewing in. I'll do that when I'm finished. I don't have to do that on camera. But this bag is turning out so pretty. I'm really happy with it. Just how I wanted it to be in my head, which is lucky. So you want to do more stitches than you think. So per single crochet, you want to do 2 or 3 stitches coming up and going down on the inside of those V's. Of course you don't have to. You can stitch it any which way you want. This is just how I'm doing it. Oops. Make sure you skip the V. Of course, it's easier to go into your work and skip the V than it is to come up, but with a little practice and maneuvering, it's not tricky. You got it. So now we're getting back up to the top, and I want to finish going around where my color matches the inside of my bag. So I want to finish sewing somewhere where this blue thread matches. So not up at the top where it's multicolored and green or black. And I'm even going into, oh, it's my tail's messed up, even doing a stitch into that center seam, because I want that being part of our strength of our bag. I don't want it flopping open where that opening is. So I'm going over that as well. And pulling your yarn tight. You don't want it loose. These are tight stitches. We want our handle to be one piece with our bag. So now I've already gone in this area. So this is my second time around. And I want to end somewhere here. So let me do a couple stitches in one spot. Make sure your tail doesn't curl on itself. So now I'm happy to join here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back up like I have been, but I'm going to put my finger on this side just so I don't pull it tight, and then go back down. And now this one, I want to put my needle through that loop just to make a little knot. Now I'm going to pull it tight. And I'm going to make, oops, there we go, another knot, just a regular knot on the inside there, and hold it down. You want that to be tight. Tight. And now I'm just going to sew my tail into the center of this. So I'm going into that open part here, that lumpy part, and I'm just going to sew up onto the top side, just so my tail is inside my work. Take your hook off, get your cute scissors. You want to use small scissors, you don't want to be hacking at your bag. And then give this a little tug and snip off your tail. And then when you release it, your tail's stuck inside and stuck in on this side as well. And you can't see where we've been joining it on the inside. So that is what we want. Do that again for your other handle. Line it up so that they are in the same spot on the other side, like there, and then we're finished. Other than doing my ends, hopefully you don't have to do yours. So finish that up, and then we'll zoom out and gloat over our good work. Yay!